Gambare, gambare. What's up, guys? I'm Hunter, and here we are to do a discussion on whether or not there's anyone, any soul, any person within the world, the massive, sprawling world of Jujutsu Kaisen who can defeat the monster, the beast, the demon, the king of curses himself, 15-finger Sukuna. Obviously, true form Sukuna is kind of very up in the air right now. Someone has to beat him, I think, but I want to talk about 15-finger, especially after 15-finger's recent appearance and showing in the anime. I've been thinking a whole bunch about 15-finger and all the different hypotheticals that could happen, so I want to quickly cover and see if anyone within the entire grand scope of the Jujutsu Kaisen universe could actually hope to defeat 15-finger Sukuna. So let's not waste any more time and let's hop right into it. What's up, guys? Elephant's here. Fun fact, I have it on me. I keep it on me at all times. And another fun fact, it's really hard to argue. It's very, very hard to argue because of how oddly powerful 15-finger is. And the reason I say oddly powerful is it's because it's a Sukuna that isn't, legally speaking, near full strength. Like, this is a 19-finger, not even an 18-finger, not even a 17 or a 16, no, 15-finger. If you think the fingers are linear and they're just literally just like a 20th of his power, then he's only at 75% here. And then if you think it's non-linear and they stack exponentially, then that's still a huge gap between himself and 20-finger. If you think they do nothing but like give him cursed energy and they don't actually increase his stats at all, and one finger is just as strong as 20-finger, it's just that it has less cursed energy, then I guess it doesn't really matter. But essentially, 15-finger is such a weirdly powerful character because pretty much every single top tier kind of directly scales beneath it, except for the one other god tier, and that's Gojo Satoru. Now, leveling with these, we gotta cover him real quick since, he is a character within the world of Jujutsu Kaisen. I want to say, especially if we're talking about the 15-finger I'm referring to, this little fellow right here. We're talking about Yuji Kuna for now. I may mention Meguna in a little bit. I want to cover him separately because obviously the 10 shadows make Meguna pretty much an 100% different combatant than regular 15-finger Yuji Kuna, but hey, I mean, it could go either way. But with that being the case, like, Gojo could likely win. Most likely. Presumably. Most likely because if the battle goes the exact same as it does in the manga, when we saw a 20-finger Sukuna go up against Gojo, without Maharaga in certain situations and without Gojo making certain decisions in terms of what he was doing against 15-finger and whether or not you think Sukuna would burn out of cursed energy. The biggest hurdle when it comes to discussing 15-finger Sukuna versus Gojo is the absolute insanity of what the fingers actually do. Because, like, no one has a clear answer for it. And Gege seemingly just stubbornly refuses to give us one. We get a whole bunch of stuff from volume releases, volume extras, Gege interviews. We get a whole bunch of junk from everywhere. But Gege has never actually sat down and told us, hey, this is exactly what the fingers do for Sukuna's energy. A lot of people assume it's just stacking, right? Because, like, well, 1 is less than 2, which is less than 3, which is less than 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm not showing you my toes. But essentially, you think it'd just be linear, but then there's weird arguments about that. Like, well, is it? Is it ever implied to be linear? Why is there such a massive gap between two beings that have 1 or 2 fingers? Huh? Is it exponential? We have no idea. Do they just bring techniques? We don't know. Essentially, the fingers are weird. But assuming the most linear interpretation of the fingers, I'm going to do this. Sukuna fans, please do not get mad at me when I say this. I'm just going to assume it's just 20-finger is stronger than 15-finger because 20 is bigger than 15. I'm going to be lazy. Presumably, Gojo would win. If Gege Akutami very specifically was writing it, say the last 5 fingers or the 4 fingers plus the mummy, let's say Kenjaku didn't find the mummy or Tengen didn't keep it 1,000 years ago, and the last 4 fingers were actually all found by Satoru before he got sealed and he kept them, and it was 15-finger pulling up on December 25th, and that was fighting Gojo. If Gege was writing it, he would very likely find a way for Sukuna to still win. And there are definitely arguments you can make for 15-finger. But just based on Gojo Satoru scaling to a better, stronger, more finger having Sukuna, which has more cursed energy than 15 finger and has a better technique than 15 finger, and overall, well, not better technique, the same technique plus another really, really good technique that's specifically built to hunt 6-eyes users. And just overall, all those factors in hand, I'm gonna confidently say Gojo Satoru would beat 15 finger. If Gege was writing it, Gojo would likely lose. I'll be real with you. But that's just out of like a story necessity thing and like, you know, Gojo's character and stuff like that. That is very particular. I think Gojo would lose. But if we're talking about just raw scaling, I think Gojo wins. Obviously, he should be stronger than 15 finger. But he may be the only one. And here's why, right? Meguna, who, well, actually, no, let me not even go into that. I was about to make the whole physical base argument. Let me not even do that. Let me just, I'm going to skirt that entire argument. We're not even going to talk about that. 15 finger has direct scaling to some of the fastest characters in the series. He just does. Completed Maki. Now, I know there are going to be people who have all different types of contentions about, well, are Maki and Toji actually that fast in the grand scheme of things? They're slower than people like Curse Naoya. They're slower than people like maybe even Human Naoya and Human Naobito. And yeah, but they're able to react to them and dodge them. Sure, even if it's precog, even if it's an enhanced sensory thing, if you are unable to react, you wouldn't be able to dodge. Whatever, if you have contention about that, that's fine, but they are some of the fastest characters in the series, and everyone speed-wise should at best be relative to them, if not fall below them. And even for characters like Yuta Okkotsu, we want to say Yuta Okkotsu is actually the second fastest sorcerer, because he is just second to Satoru Gojo and everything, and even Kenny fears him. Even being generous as possible to Yuta and say he was holding back entire perception blitz tiers back against Ryu, then at best he'd be relative to Sukuna and have nothing to actually offer. That's it. Let's say that the same speed gap exists between 15 finger Meguna and Ryu exists with Yuta and Ryu. Like, Yuta at any time could have just pulled out his guitar and say, you know what, Ryu, I'm getting sick and tired of this. Let me just instantly off them. Being as generous as humanly possible to Yuta, and assuming that would be the case, then you still run into the issue where he's just relative and none of his techniques would actually work that well against Yuji Kuna. Let's break down all of Yuta's kit. Number one, the big, beefy, bad boy. His base cell. Honestly, while I definitely respect Unmanifested Rika being able to restrain not fully healed demon god Yuji, respectable. That Yuji's not as strong as 15 finger Yuji Kuna. Just clearly is not. Yuji only gets those like 15 level, well, I'd say about the 15 finger levels of strength and speed and potency and destructive capacity with just physicals after he's liberated from Sukuna. That's when Sukuna flat out acknowledges that he doesn't know where the strength is coming from, meaning Yuji got an amp up to that point. So Unmanifested Rika is pretty much unproven against someone who is much stronger than the Yuji that she ended up restraining. And don't get me wrong, base Yuta is still extremely powerful. Base Yuta inarguably is a top 10 character, well, base alone, but with Unmanifested Rika not being locked off somewhere else. Just Unmanifested Rika, Unfully Manifested Rika, and base Yuta threats. No curse technique at all, but they're not beating Sukuna, who could just tear straight through Yuta. But let's say, you know, that's not generous enough. Let's give Yuta the ring. Let's slide them 5 minutes on. Let's give him Fully Manifested Rika. Fully Manifested Rika is getting blitzed. I can buy the argument that Yuta was holding back on Ryu. Perception Blitz tier is kind of hard for me to buy it, but whatever. Let's go with that. Yuta was holding back Perception Blitz tier. Why would Rika hold back? I know she's like under pseudo control by Yuta and she listens to him, but like we very specifically see her and Ryu go relative in speed. They're able to go blow for blow. Rika's able to take damage from Ryu's punches. So what happens when she gets cleaved? What happens when she tries to hit Sukuna and whiffs because he perception blitzes around her? Realize Sukuna is implied, at least a lot during the Gojo versus Sukuna fight, to have a similar kind of precog and like almost heavenly restriction sort of state that Maki and Toji have, where he just perceives things better than everybody else and is able to read the atmosphere much better. It's especially shown when Gojo's doing his flash step around Sukuna, and Sukuna's like, okay, the real one's here. And he grabs Gojo's fist, catching Gojo off guard because Sukuna shouldn't have been able to read that so well. But no, Sukuna has some variation of the same kind of precog that Maki and Toji does. And we very specifically see him go bar for bar with the demonic fighter equal to Toji Zenin in Maki while she was getting assisted by Itadori, who had just gotten liberated. And he's able to deal with them both at the same time while his curse technique is nerfed. So you unnerf the curse technique. You go against a character who should be slower than Sukuna by a decent margin in Rika, and she's getting cleaved in half. Pretty casually. I know she has a bunch of cursed energy, but then get dismantled. Something's gonna happen. Rika ain't gonna be too much of a benefactor. And here's the thing, right? Hypothetical Yuta could go crazy. I'm gonna make the video on hypothetical Yuta's full kit, full potential, all that. But from what we know of Yuta right now, sky manipulation, it could work if you argue that Yuta and Sukuna 15 finger are relative in speed, but ultimately I don't see Sukuna getting tagged by a thin icebreaker. I could literally see him grabbing Yuta's wrists and pulling his hands apart, just not letting him do it. I could see pretty inarguably the Shikigami technique being absolutely worthless. Sukuna would just rip them out of the air like Uro did, and or just never get caught in the little orbiting domain. Even cursed speech, once again, since Sukuna has so much cursed energy, so much raw girth in terms of output. Remember, if you think the fingers are linear, Yuta very specifically says 20 finger Sukuna likely has over twice the cursed energy that I have. So, Mr. Boundless Cursed Energy has already admitted inferiority to 20 finger Sukuna in terms of raw cursed energy amount. So, 15 finger. If it was 10 finger, you may be able to make the argument that Yuta and Sukuna have relative amounts of cursed energy, but it's 15 finger. So, reasonably, 15 finger would still have more cursed energy than Yuta. Thusly, cursed speech probably wouldn't be that effective against them. Yuta would probably actually experience blowback from using cursed speech on Sukuna for the first time. So all of Yuta's techniques are fundamentally worthless. And Yuta, at any moment, remember, at any moment, especially if you go by how the anime decides to portray Sukuna's utilization of cleave and dismantle, at any moment, boom, Yuta's arms are torn off. His legs are spread somewhere else. His torso cleaved to pieces. Like, remember, at any moment, that can happen. Heaven forbid Sukuna actually decides to pull out the flame arrow and just start boom, 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 and just starts launching them off at him. He can do that at any moment, and he has the cursed energy to spare and the efficiency. And I've been being generous as all get out to Yuta, so let's keep being generous. Let's say Yuta somehow survives all of that. He's way stronger and should have comparable, if not better, regen than Jogo, so he's able to heal off all the cleaves and dismantles. He's able to pull what Gojo Satoru was able to do for a bit when he was in Malevolent Shrine and just kind of fight back a bit. Domain expansion. Now, Yuta Okkotsu has his own domain expansion, don't get me wrong, I do know that. The factuals are actuals. I do know for a fact that Yuta has his own domain expansion, but considering even he's caught off guard by the barrierless nature of the domain, and considering we see way back in Sendai, he had a barrier domain, his domain is going to lose to Sukuna's in a domain clash. And unlike Satoru Gojo, I don't think Yuta has the capacity to consistently heal his brain, and consistently turn it back on, turn his curse technique back on, and go for another domain battle. So I think Yuta's domain gets shattered. Rika ends up getting, well, actually no, because we see fully manifested Rika does linger around. So fully manifested Rika seems disconnected to Yuta's copy technique. That specifically got burnt out. But Rika herself was able to linger around. So Rika would be fine, unless she's caught in the domain. Rika would be torn to pieces then. But then you essentially have Yuta burnt out of his technique up against a Sukuna who's going to be laughing at him as he's torn to pieces. And don't get me wrong, Yuta can definitely RCT a whole bunch, but considering Sukuna doesn't need to actually attack Yuta while in his domain, and while Yuta probably has a simple domain kind of variant, I hope Yuta does. I hope he does. I hope he didn't pull, I seriously hope he didn't pull Anonymity, encounter a domain user, realize he was going to run into domains, and then never bother to learn simple domain. I hope he knows it. But even then, if he goes for simple domain, Sukuna can just press him. And then, obviously, Yuta's not going to be able to maintain a simple domain. It's going to be getting torn apart by Malevolent Shrine as Sukuna's pressing him. And unlike Satoru, not only does Yuta lack a technique to immediately leave the area, if his technique comes back in time. Like, Gojo could, once his technique was restored, just teleport out of the range of Malevolent Shrine. He didn't, because he saw through Gojo. But Yuta Okkotsu, very much in particular, does not have something like that. Hypothetical Yuta maybe does. Hypothetical Yuta is based, but going off current Yuta right now, this does not have a win con against Yuji Kuna. Simply does not. Yuji Kuna has more cursed energy, overall a better technique, and you have to be omega generous to Yuta to even imply that they're relative in speed. That's the thing. I cannot give it to him. So Yuta isn't able to do it. Let's talk about another special raid. Yuki Tsukumo. Now, Yuki Tsukumo is a weird one, but I think ultimately, just based on her scaling to Kenjaku and Kenjaku's lack of scaling the 15 finger, I overall think that she loses maybe, no, not even maybe, faster than Yuta does, considering her lesser amounts of cursed energy, her, I don't want to say lesser amounts of RCT. She's able to restore her entire arm pretty quickly. So it's still a good amount of RCT. But everything that Sukuna does is not only going to consistently lower her output, it's very unlikely she's actually able to hit him. Remember, she very specifically hit Kenjaku when Kenjaku didn't know what her curse technique was, had his guard up, and blocked her hit. And sure, Sukuna may go through the same thing. He may be shocked and bamboozled when she maybe, I don't know, somehow manages to dodge a cleave, or he just stands there and he goes to block one of her hits, and maybe his arm gets blown off. And he's like, oh, nice one. Snaps the arm back on, throws the cleave and dismantle her way. Yuki literally cannot perceive and gets sliced in half. If Yuki's getting blown through it, she's literally having her guts blown out by mini Uzumakis. I know a mini Uzumaki is likely a concentrated variation of a maximum technique, is likely insanely powerful, but I still think a cleave from Sukuna, especially a serious one, is cutting Yuki in half. And we very specifically see she's not recovering from that. And unfortunately for Yuki, I don't see Sukuna getting grabbed. Like, I don't think he would get close enough to risk being grabbed and black holed. And that's if Sukuna decides to, like, just hit her with one slash. If he decides to Nanako and Mimiko her, she's not going to be in enough pieces to activate her technique's ultimate trump card. They're like, well, man, Sukuna may lose to the black hole. In fact, I'll give it that. Sukuna would lose to the black hole. If Yuki tried to shut it off, then maybe he would, and maybe he'd live it. He'd just, like, bulk through it. He'd be torn to pieces, but he'd be like, he would, like, come back like Toji did out of Megumi's domain to be like, I live, but with like 1 HP. But if she gets the black hole off, then that's it. But I don't see Yuki hitting him. Even if Yuki does land a hit, he's going to immediately heal off that, learn the lesson, and go to cleave in this man's are. And she's not tanking those. I'm sorry, Yuki fans, but she has not bad durability. She still has special grade tier durability. But if mini Uzumakis can casually burn through her, and one of Kenjaku's sure hits is able to just straight mutilate her, what do you want a cleave to do to her? What do you want cleave and dismantle to do to her? It's not going to be fair. Fire arrow. If a mini Uzumaki was able to burn Yuki's face a whole bunch and blow through her guts, a fire arrow is literally going to tear through her torso. Just leave her burning and smoking on the ground. It's not going to be a pretty sight for Yuki. But what about the other special grade? What about Suguru Geto? Unfortunately, Geto runs into the same problem that he runs into with pretty much all of his fights. With no domain, if Sukuna opens it, he loses. And the same thing with Yuki, by the way. I didn't even mention Yuki's domain because we don't know what it does in a similar vein to Yuta's. But, like, her domain loses to Sukuna's. Geto doesn't even have a domain. Maybe you could argue Geto would, like, flood the battlefield with curses and Sukuna would just start tearing through them. But if Sukuna gets bored at any moment, he throws a cleave and it tears through everything, including Geto. And once again, it's hard. Scaling was super duper hard. You'd have to argue that Yuta has gotten no stronger from his year of training, and that the same Yuta from JJK0, who was already pressing Geto very, very well, and with the Max Rika Blast was able to blow through one of Geto's maximum Uzumakis that was fueled by a whole bunch of cursed spirits, you would have to argue that that Yuta is the same as current Yuta, who is actually secretly a whole blitz tier above Ryu as well, and could one-shot Ryu too. And then by proxy, Geto will be able to one-shot Ryu as well. You have to argue all that. And even then, that just gives Geto relativity to Sukuna. Relativity that doesn't matter when every single one of his curses, his entire arsenal, and most likely his face is getting sliced straight in half. Especially if Sukuna gets at all bored. So, It's pretty unfortunate. And considering the level of power and speed that Sukuna would be at, none of Geto's curses will be able to do anything. None of them at all. Don't get me wrong, we don't know Geto's full arsenal. Geto could have reached into his back pocket and pulled out, I don't know, Goku as a curse. Just the fear of Goku manifested, and suddenly Goku would pop out. But since we don't know if he has anyone of that level, and it doesn't seem like he does, I don't even think... But I don't think adult Geto. I don't think adult Geto has a curse on the same tier as Jogo, or any of the disaster curses. Really, I really don't think he does, because we never got to see it, and thusly every single curse would get one. Sukuna could probably exist, and he would fear hacks half the curses. They would bow instinctively to their king, and then Geto would be sliced in half. Unfortunately, Geto just ain't got it. But what about the man who took Geto's body, Suguru Geto's flesh? Could he stand a chance against 15 Fingers Sukuna? No. And the main reason I say this is because we see that Kenny, when being encountered by Satoru Gojo, loses his good mind and is begging and screaming and crying for Big Daddy Sukuna to come and save him, specifically a 15-finger Big Daddy Sukuna in Megami's body. Let's just assume, once again, not even going to go into the physical reinforcement argument, let's just assume 15-finger equals 15-finger no matter the vessel, because that's how it works. 15-finger was able to intercept Gojo, at least a bit. 15-finger gave Kenjaku reassurance and was the main thing that Kenjaku was sticking right on by the entire time to make sure Gojo didn't come and load him at complete random. So Kenny directly admits inferiority to that variation of Sukuna by needing his protection for an entire month. Thusly, Sukuna would do the exact same thing to Kenjaku that he would do to Geto. Just right in half. Tear him to pieces with one casual cleave. Don't get me wrong, the gravity technique could be interesting, and considering Kenjaku is the only other character with a barrierless domain, maybe you could argue it, but at best, Sukuna's domain range is likely larger, if that matters, meaning that Kenjaku wouldn't be able to escape it, and also their sure hits would just cancel out for the most part, and then you just get Kenjaku versus 15-finger Sukuna again, and Kenny loses. Especially if you think Geto or Kenjaku isn't actually any stronger than Geto. If you think his cursed energy amounts didn't do anything to bolster Geto's physicals, he's just the same as Geto. It was weaker than JJK0 Yuta. That's more embarrassing. Backward scaling that is even more embarrassing for everyone else. But then that just means Kenny loses even worse. You couldn't even argue relativity or anything like that. That would be awful, and Kenny would get absolutely nagged. Maybe the gravity technique could interfere with Sukuna's attacks a little bit, but obviously Sukuna would read the intervals. He would realize, oh, okay, it's a 6-second. If Yuki could figure out the intervals, Sukuna, who figured out Maharaga's technique after 2 tries, would be able to figure out the intervals of the gravity technique, and then just time a cleave perfectly to just cleave straight off, cleave Geto, or fake Geto and Kenjaku in half. He would probably, just to be sadistic about it, he would aim straight for the stitches. He'd be like, thanks for giving me a line of attack, Kenjaku, and just boom, dome piece straight in half. Geto don't stand a chance. And that's the thing. After that, we run into more powerful characters, don't get me wrong, but not too much is going to change. Toji and Maki, we literally saw the fight. Admittedly, you could make a interesting argument. Well, 15 Fingers Sukuna didn't have nerf physicals because he says physical movements are fine. So it should have been able to dodge fine. And Maki, who is the equivalent to Toji, was very specifically holding back on Megami because she didn't want to use Soul Split. Well, Soul Split's hanging up there, but didn't want to use Soul Split Katana because she didn't know if those were healable. She didn't want to do soul damage to Megami because she wasn't sure if that could be taken care of. So maybe you could make a somewhat jank argument for Toji and Maki if they specifically resort to Soul Split as quickly as possible and Sukuna actually allows himself to get hit. Because then Sukuna wouldn't be able to heal that body part. But then I think in fear, as a natural response, he would just burst with Cleave. Or specifically because he can't sense any curse energy from him, he would burst with Dismantle. And considering that, Ryomen, with their maximum output of their technique, was able to tag 15 finger, but was able to tag a post-Sakurajima Maki who's an equal demonic fighter to Toji Zenin, specifically Prime Toji. I think if Sukuna even at all bursts with Cleave or Dismantle, they're getting torn in half. and then they immediately perish. Like, I'm sorry. As much as I'm pushing the Maki and Toji agenda to the max. I'm pushing it as much as I humanly can, but I can't even push it that far. Not against 15 Finger. And heaven forbid he opens domain around start. He like, I don't like how you feel. You give bad vibes. And he opens domain, they immediately lose because of dismantle. Not cleave. Sure, they're recognized as buildings, but Level is trying to work on buildings too. So they'd get dismantled to oblivion. Unfortunately, I just don't see it. The only way I can see it is if they sneak him when he's not paying attention and they instantly go for the head or the neck or something. They cannot play around and aim for arms. Because the moment Suguna finds out he cannot heal that damage because it literally cut off a piece of his soul, he would be like, oh, no. And immediately go in for the full retaliation. The best argument you'd have to make is like Toji and Maki are relative and they have soul split and they go immediately for the decapitation or something. But that's the only thing you can argue. Other than that, it's pretty much impossible to put those kind of stipulations on and not expect Sukuna to figure out or be wary of the cursed tool and not want to get hit by it in the first place. Sukuna's not stupid. Once again, he's arrogant. He's a loudmouth, he's braggadocious, but he's not stupid. He would not let himself get hit by a random cursed tool, especially if they're going to swing for a lethal area first. So if they're going for his head, he's going to react defensively. Because why else would you be going for the head? Why aren't we having fun first? So yeah, I don't really see it. Even with Toji and Maki, which hurts the Toji Maki glazer in me. But the next character we got to talk about is the other heavy hitter of Jujutsu High, Hakari Kinji. And Hakari loses. I hate to say it. I really do. I love Hakari Kinji. I love the fact that my bro pulled up in them J's. But let's be real. Let's be real. There's a reason bro's fighting Uraume and not Sukuna. Well, of course, that's 20 Finger. How could I argue, hypothetically, that Hakari Kinji, the man stronger than Yuta Okkotsu when on a roll, could possibly lose to Sukuna just domains? Especially if because Sukuna seems like the kind of guy to domain on reflex. Like, if he actually were to ever face a domain, I feel like Sukuna is the kind of guy who would immediately go back and try to counter domain the same instant, just in case, because he doesn't know what domains do. Especially Hakari's domain, he never actually encountered it. So if Hakari were to randomly hit the domain expansion, especially if it's Hakari's first one of the day, then Sukuna would be like, oh, wait, what does this do? And then the instant the information starts to flood in, he's going to reflexively activate his own domain. And that's going to lead to Hakari's domain getting torn apart from the outside and Hakari instantly perishing. I don't think I need to convince you that base Hakari scales lower than 15 Finger Sukuna. If I do, I'm just going to tell you to go read this wonderful little manga called JJK. Nah, but let's be generous to Hakari. Let's assume he starts in jackpot. Let's assume he has infinite jackpots. Unfortunately, RCT is not perfect. RCT is not the fountain of youth from Seven Deadly Sins. It's not, I wouldn't even say it's like Full Metal Alchemist with the Philosopher's Stones. It's not even, what's another good example of extreme regeneration? It's not even like the goddesses from Seven Deadly Sins being able to regenerate from like whole entire limbs and heal whole other people of their entire, no. If Sukuna lops off Hakari's head, and don't get me wrong, maybe you can make the argument that Kashimo's lightning bolts are stronger than cleave and dismantle. I wouldn't make that argument. I'd say at best they're relative. One straight cleave to Hakari's neck and his head's disconnected. And sure, he has infinite cursed energy and RCT comes from the brain, but I don't think he's healing all that. If Hazunoki's RCT was able to be stopped by his neck not even like being fully removed from his body, but only pierced through like at certain spots, like in the jugular and right here, if that was enough to stop Hazunoki's regen, Hakari literally losing his mind by having his head removed, I think that's more than enough to kind of stuff his regen to the point where it was rough stuff, broski. I just really don't see Hakari being able to pull it out. Especially considering with those pillow punches he has, he couldn't really do any permanent real damage to Kashimo. And Kashimo, while he's extremely powerful and base, don't get me wrong, he lands 0 hits on 20 Finger Omega Fatigued Mega. But with that being the case, I don't think there's any real argument you can make that Hakari's even fast enough to hit or even perceive Yuji Kuna. And thusly, Yuji Kuna would just throw cleaves and dismantles at him. At best, I can see Suguna playing around with him, being like, "Oh, you're an immortal. It's been a while since I fought one of those. Here, hold this," and just starts slicing through a whole bunch of them, consistently watching Hakari regenerate, eventually getting bored like he did with Jogo and just lopping his head off. And then Hakari, man, My luck finally ran out, huh? Darn. And then that's it. But there is a sleeper pick, a sleeper individual. Well, let me mention the Sendai trio first. Earl sensed 15 finger and started crying, sweating, and spitting up. They are not fighting. They didn't even see him. They felt him. They're not fighting 15 finger. Same thing for Ryu. I love Ryu. I'm a Ryu rider. I'm gonna make a Ryu's underrated video because the thing is, I think a lot of people don't even have Ryu in their top 15, which is crazy to me. People have Jogo above Ryu. Maybe want to hurl, but even with that being the case, we literally saw the fight. 15 finger variation of Sukuna just takes him slightly more serious with the cleave, and then Ryu's head is in pieces. Sorry, I can't even begin to push a narrative agenda there at all. He's the main reason why that battle is the main reason why I think Yuta doesn't even have a chance against 15 Finger, so how am I going to suddenly give Ryu a chance when he literally lost the fight? Yorozu, another case where if Yuji Kuna, who doesn't have the 10 shadows, actually wants to fight her, she's getting cleaved in half immediately. Shock horror. It's terrifying. And once again, if Sukuna does not have an answer to her domain immediately, if he even lets her activate Perfect Spear before instantly executing her, considering he's not going to go into this battle with any sort of pretense of trying to test out something new, or, you know, trying to use the technique of another individual to fully sink their soul, he's just going to immediately one-shot her. Without her even perceiving it, most likely. That's how much above her she is. She only lands hits on him once the wheel comes out, because he very specifically wants to test the wheel's adaptation, how long it takes, and how much potency it has in regards to adapting to specific techniques. She doesn't actually have any real scaling to 15-finger Sukuna. She's able to damage him, though, so her punches are enough. I don't think Sukuna can lower his durability, unless you argue he doesn't reinforce his face all the time. Maybe. That's about it. But yeah, Yorozu doesn't stand a chance. Angel's a weird one. Because, like, notably, Angel only says our light will work so well because he's only freshly incarnated into Meguna. So, like, if Angel drops Jacob's Ladder on Yuji Kuna, who's been Yuji Kuna for a while now, maybe it just does nothing, but he is an evil spirit, right? He is an evil spirit incarnating into the flesh of another. So maybe Jacob's Ladder would do some numbers to him. Maybe it wouldn't. I don't know. That one's the most contentious one, I will admit. I'm not entirely sure how that one would go. But I assume if they're actually in a 1v1 and Hana isn't trying to sneak Sukuna, like Hana attempted to sneak and succeeded in sneaking Meguna, then literally gets cleaved before Jacob's Ladder can actually activate, especially considering it's a maximum technique, and in the redraws of 214, I forget the redraws, but very specifically, we see Hana has to do this whole, like, proper ceremony, summoning the light, doing all that, the babies come down, she starts to play the trumpet, like, Sukuna's cleaving them in half before any of that can actually happen. That's about it. And then the rest of the cast kind of doesn't really matter. I mean, Takaba could survive against Sukuna for an extended period of time, I guess. But, like, he's not gonna beat him. He isn't. And, like, Sukuna opens domain expansion. Let's see how funny that is for Takaba. For anybody else, like, we don't know new Yuji's kit yet. We do not know new Yuji, so we just have to go off liberated Yuji. And we literally see the fight. Yuji's able to land hits very specifically because Sukuna's technique is fatigued and he's dealing with a whole other human being in Maki, who's superior to that Yuji, who I also think loses to Sukuna. So ultimately it doesn't really matter. I don't think that Yuji's gonna be able to do anything. And what do you want me to cover? The grade 1s? You want Bird Strike? You think Bird Strike's gonna take Sukuna out because it's only been stopped by Satoru Gojo? Yeah, it's not gonna do it. And that's it. Every other character in the series stands no chance. I've tried to cover everybody in enough detail. If you guys disagree, if you think there are any more characters in verse who can actually beat Sukuna, please let me know down below. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, please leave Gambale in the comment section down below. If you're wondering how to spell that, Gambare, I think. Gambale, gambale, gambale. Leave that in the comment section down below. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And make sure you hit that little notification bell so you do not miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, I do have a Patreon down below. You support for as low as one down month. Things like exclusive videos, early content, and more. I also become a member of the channel for as low as $3 a month to get the same perks and more. Some of those perks will include the live reaction to the next chapter of Jujutsu Kaisen. Now, I want to thank you guys so much for watching once again, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is that guy with the pencil, writing off. I'd like to give a thank you to our $3 members, Wakana Plays and Redwolf4765. I'd like to give a thank you to our $5 patrons, Winter, Victor, Sean, Midnight Gemlord, Kevin, and Demix LND. I'd like to give another thank you to our $7 member, Autumn's Morning Lazo. I'd like to give another scrumdiddlyumptious thank you to our $10 patrons, Robbie Uchiha, Joaquin, and Ida Mokami. I'd like to give another thank you to our $25 member, Alex Ice Rose. I'd like to give one final thank you to our $25 patrons, Igneal and Calvin Elder.